have three major events that take place in the course of the Israelites' emergence as a people. Number one, the Exodus. God appears to the people of Israel on that fateful night at exactly midnight. And God was revealed to the entire people, and they sensed God's presence in a way that they had never sensed before, in a way that you could not sense just by believing or just by reasoning, but they could actually see and sense the presence of the Creator creating. So then, if that's true, why was it necessary to have the splitting of the sea, which the splitting of the sea also had with it, according to the Kabbalists, according to the rabbis in the Talmud, according to the Hasidic masters, revelation of God on the highest level? And then the question is again, why the need for another revelation at Sinai? Just give them the law. Just the facts, ma'am, as Sergeant Friday would say. 10 Commandments, okay, we'll do the 10 Commandments. Why? The revelation of God on Sinai. The great Maharal, Rabbi Lowy of Prague, describes it as this way. There's a revelation for the mind, for the intellect. There's a second revelation for the soul. And the third revelation is required for the transformation of the physical. Mind, soul, physical. In colloquial terms, in Musar terms, we call it Olam, Shana, Nefesh. Space, time, soul. I know that doesn't follow the pattern of wisdom or mind, soul, and material, but it really follows the same pattern. I'll explain that at another time. What exactly take place? The first thing is that you have to get a person to believe. And my friend Brian insists that you cannot believe because there's just too much evidence to the contrary. And I say, Brian, that it is mathematically impossible for us to have come from an infinite series of time, because time is events lined up together. You can go from here to infinity, but you can't start from infinity to get to here, because it never started. And therefore, we cannot have a series of time. Since there is time and a series of time, we have to conclude that time began at a point somewhere back in our memory, in the memory of the world. And you realize somebody had to start all of this. And the mind becomes aware, acutely aware, of the presence of the Creator. But that's not enough. You can believe and see the effect of the Creator killing the firstborn of Egypt and going out the next day. But the world remains a physical world. God causes the soul of the firstborn to depart like iron to a magnet. Iron becomes attracted to a magnet, so too the souls become attracted to God. The reason why our souls did not leave our bodies is because we had commandments. The commandments are one with God. And so we were attracted to the God that was in our bodies, that was doing the mitzvahs. And so we were attracted to God within our bodies because our bodies had been the carriers of the mitzvahs. The Egyptians didn't fulfill any mitzvahs, any commandments. And as a result, their souls did not want to stay in their bodies, or were attracted to God and left just like that. But that's the soul leaving. That's not the physical changing. Physical remains the same. So now you have to bring the spiritual, the awareness that God created everything. God has control over everything, into physical reality, that the physical reality is also governed by God. And that seems to be unlikely. So the sun rises every day. We have the four seasons. We have winds. We have rain. We have all of the various components of life. All of these components seem to be independent of God. That God runs these things as God wishes is not something you could imagine. You can imagine a God who controls your life or death. But a God who causes everything to happen and controls them and changes them and alters them beyond our awareness. So we had to become aware that God runs the physical world and can alter it anytime God wants. So we go from faith, which is mind, to soul, that the soul should feel excited and realize that things aren't as solid as they seem. It's all dependent upon God's will. So what do we need? The giving of the Torah. We need the giving of the Torah for quite another reason. See, when you realize that God controls the world, you might postulate that God controls the forces, and God is a force. God is the ultimate force, and God causes things to happen. And those forces can move things around. But that the world is just an expression of God's desire, and that God's desire is for us to sacrifice our material, to transform our material into godliness. And God's desire is not that we lose our lives, not that we go ahead and fast, but God's desire is that we consecrate the physical, that the physical can be consecrated. And that's because, not because the physical has any quality, any force, any vector that evokes pleasure from God. No. It's just that God desired that something so far away should be transformed into goodness. And so, it isn't just that God is a force, that God controls all the forces. It's that everything is completely by the desire of God, and God desires the physical body to change. And so, at the time of the giving of the Torah, we see how God is beyond the force, how God is not a force, how God is completely infinite, and that this infinite God wants the physical earth, the human being, in his or her body, to consecrate that body and that earth according to the way God wants. And so the third revelation is revealing the nature of God, how God is transcendent and God is above all else. And God isn't just a wisdom, and God isn't just a force. God is infinite. And the infinite desires the finite, the physical that's devoted and designated to God. In the words of the rabbis, the words of the Maral, God is Bligvul, infinite. Man is finite, but is a thing. But when man subjugates his physical desires and becomes subordinate to God, then man becomes what? Nothing. When man becomes nothing, has negated his desire, has negated his ego,